Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swaggle Haas. And in this video, we got to talk about Star Wars, and more specifically, Obi-Wan Kenobi, because of course, on Disney Plus, we are now 3 episodes in to that show, and I thought it would be really interesting to take a look at some of the market, what books are moving, or maybe what books are not moving as a result of that, and really just sort of ask the question, where is the hype? But before I get into the video, if you guys could drop me a like or comment or subscribe if you're enjoying the content, helps support the channel, doing those things, I would appreciate it. But let's get into this video here today. And of course, for me, I just kind of want to go with you guys and take a look at some of the books in the market and see kind of where, the heat is or where the heat is not, because it really does feel like even though, we have, this new Disney Plus show that everyone is sort of excited about. I mean, I know that there's always going to be polarizing opinions on whether the show is good or not. To me, I feel like that's not really what we're here to talk about. We're here to sort of just look at the market and see how the market is reacting. Now, of course, people could be down on the show because they don't like it. But usually, even with, shows not being well received by fans, that doesn't usually affect the comic book market too much. There still is always going to be, sales on spec books and things like that, even if the show is not performing very well. So let's first talk about this book right here, Star Wars #2. Of course, we got to talk about this one because it is the first appearance in story of Obi-Wan Kenobi, who of course is the, titular character of the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, played by Ewan McGregor. And this is a book that I find, really interesting. I mean, I kind of feel like, if we're thinking about this book and we're thinking about the Star Wars stuff, they really started to blow up, at least the comic books, when we originally got that Mandalorian show. And this was one of the books that definitely heated up a lot in the market. And as I kind of dug into the numbers for this one, I thought it was really interesting because, when I look at the 9.8s here, surprisingly, this is one of the few books and few instances where we got an all-new record high as a result of the show being on air for Star Wars here. So you can just kind of see from the graph right here, this is 2021. The book obviously shot up with everything else, had some, spikes and stuff due to speculation, had its correction, and now actually, basically the month where the show comes out here on 4/30, we actually got the record high sale for this book at $6,100. Now, to me, I kind of think that this is probably a little bit more of an anomaly. I mean, when I actually look at this book and we take a look down here at the census, even though there's 2,700 copies on the census, there's only 142 9.8s, which honestly is not that much when we think about a book that came out in 1977 and like how many books are on the census. We're going to take a look at Star Wars #1, and you guys will see like how many more Star Wars #1s there are on the census than Star Wars #2. So it kind of doesn't surprise me that, the 9.8 sale based on the release of the show could actually have maybe been the only book at auction at the time. This basically sold earlier this month. And so it could have just been the only one available in the market, and somebody just wanted it then, and they were willing to pay $6,100 for it. And that set the all new record high. But I would be surprised if that's a number that we're going to see again for this book, because really when I go onto eBay and just look at some of the sales, I mean, granted, there have been some sales at the start of the show. So we got on the 27th, this is May 26th, but you can see if I just kind of scroll up, we're only talking about one page full of sales here. And just to put it into perspective, if I were to go the weeks before the show, it would be similar. You'd be seeing the same amount of sales for this book, generally speaking, from week to week. So, maybe there's been a slight uptick in sales for this book overall, but generally speaking, it doesn't feel like we're getting sort of a new wave of sales, kind of like how we got when we got the hype of the She-Hulk trailer. It's like obviously Savage She-Hulk gets a massive spike, but this book right here, it's like, we haven't really been seeing this one on cover price. We haven't really been seeing this one on, the CBSI report. We haven't been seeing this one on the Go Collect hot list, or even on, the Key Collector hot list and stuff. So it's interesting to think about the comic book market is still mostly focused on, what's going on in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and also what's going on in some of the DC stuff, like for Batman and for Black Adam. And just to finish up in this book, when we look at some of the other grades here, like if I drop down to the 9.6, you can see that this is a book that has definitely been on the decline since like the boom of 2021. Now, it could be due to the fact that this is just sort of the state of the comic book market. Everything went up, things corrected. Now the economy is kind of tough. Maybe it has a little bit of this upswing right here due to the fact that there's some excitement for the show. But generally speaking, across multiple grades, like if I go to the 9.4 here, the graph is going to look pretty similar to what we see. And then I think if I go down to the 9.2, it's also going to look somewhat similar. So a big spike up, and then has kind of leveled off right here. So this one I think is interesting. It's like, it doesn't feel like this book is as exciting to the market as maybe you would think that it would be based on where we are with the show. But if we look at Star Wars #1, I was actually really surprised to see some of the numbers for this book right here, because this one actually seems to be holding pretty strong overall in the market. And that could be due to the fact that, maybe Obi-Wan is on the cover, for this one. So anyone who wants to own, say, the first appearance of Obi-Wan, they can sort of have that itch scratch because he's just on the cover for this one. I mean, it feels like if you're a Star Wars fan, what a great collector's book to own. Just the cover alone is worth having, in a collection, on top of the fact that it is the first appearance of all these characters. But this one is interesting to me because, when I look at some of the numbers of this one, Star Wars #1, this book has actually held pretty strong overall. I mean, there's definitely been some ups and downs. There's been some, record low sales and record high sales and things like that. But generally speaking, when we look at that graph, ever since we got to 2021, this has been a very, very strong book in the market. Even though, yes, maybe some of the recent sales have been a little bit lower at 5,100, 5,400, things like that. And maybe the 90-day moving average, is going down overall. But really, when you take a step back and look at that big picture, this book has held pretty strong, especially at the 9.8 grade. And this is actually true of all the grades across the board. Here's the 9.6 graph. As you can see, the graph is held pretty strong overall. Here's the 9.4 graph right here. Again, when you can look at it, again, the graph has held pretty strong overall. So this is a book that, definitely has shown that it has some staying power in the market. And like I was saying with, the census here, this is actually true for a book that has 12,000 on the census, which, at this time is probably in line to where it would be, 716 9.8s. But it also just goes to show that, this is actually a very, very strong Star Wars book in the market that is always in demand. And even outside of sort of the show spec and show hype with Obi-Wan Kenobi, this book has been holding strong overall, even more so than that of Star Wars #2. Now, there are some other interesting books to talk about for the Disney Plus show. Of course, there was this one right here, Darth Vader #6, which featured the first appearance of the Grand Inquisitor. And this was definitely a book that when we initially got that trailer and the visuals of the Grand Inquisitor in the show, this was definitely a book that got super hot in the market. I mean, for sure, this was showing up on all the trending lists, on all the hot lists and things like that. I won't go into spoilers for the show, but definitely, we got him in his appearance. And I don't know, kind of like some of the other books related to Boba Fett, this one has had a huge rise and a huge fall. And this is just sort of the nature of what's going to happen with books like this that are kind of flavor of the week. As you can see here, this is a book that kind of sat around that, $250 price point, say at the beginning of 2021, when we got the sort of maybe the announcement that he was coming, or it was that first trailer for Obi-Wan. This book shot up to about $530. And then here we are kind of at the, debut of the show. And even though we're seeing him in these actual episodes, we're really not selling at a point that is any higher than where we were before. And this is just sort of, what's going to happen with the FOMO and the hype and all that stuff. Last couple sales here on May 30th are $270 and $274. And you would have to go all the way back to, basically January to find prices, January of 2021 to find prices that rival that of the prices that they're selling at for right now. But it's not the Grand Inquisitor's fault or anything like that, or what's going on with the show. I mean, we've had some other ones in the Book of Boba Fett that we can talk about. Remember this book right here, Star Wars Darth Maul #2, which was the first appearance of Cad Bane. This was also a book that blew up extremely high into the market due to all the excitement for the appearance of that character in the Boba Fett show. I don't think it's a spoiler at this point to tell you guys that, he ended up getting killed by Boba Fett later in that episode. And you can see right here from the graph, I mean, this is a book that absolutely shot up $671 in February when we were at the height of the show, or maybe that was the week that episode came out. And look at where we are now, $290. So, maybe this is due to the fact that, this is just a combination of FOMO, state of the market. Maybe people don't like what they're seeing in Star Wars. But, a lot of these books in the Star Wars market really don't have the same sort of staying power that I think the older books have, at least for the Star Wars universe, and specifically that of Star Wars #1. This is another book here. Remember this one, Darth Vader #1, first appearance of Black Chrysanthemum. Of course, we got him in the Book of Boba Fett as well. Had a massive spike up. I mean, one of the biggest spike ups. I mean, look at this chart right here. Let me move away. I mean, just look at that graph right there. You can see how big of a spike this thing had. And basically where we are now is basically around the floor that we had this book at before the start of the show. So another book that really, really has fallen off overall. And right now we kind of got, in the recent episode, we got the, this is maybe a light spoiler, a mention of Quilan Vos. A few sales here in the market for this book. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sales or so. I mean, just to put it in perspective, May 28th, a 9.6 is selling for 118. Now we get a 9.6 sale around 210. So basically a book that doubled overnight due to the fact that, we've mentioned this character now in Obi-Wan Kenobi. I mean, I think it would be a pretty safe assumption that they're going to show up, in the show later on. But generally speaking, I mean, this is also probably going to be another book that, falls off pretty hard once we see the character and find ourselves on the other end of the show. But, I think it's really interesting. I mean, it feels like, even though there are some books moving in the market, really it doesn't feel like there's too much hype for the Star Wars comic books out there right now. I mean, granted, Star Wars #1 is definitely a book that I'm super impressed with. I mean, it feels like the floor is pretty steady with that thing. And as long as we're going to have, Star Wars properties, which of course we're going to have them, throughout time of Disney here, that book I think is always going to have a special place in collectors' hearts and is always going to be desirable in the market. Star Wars #2, I'm a little bit concerned for that book. I mean, similar to, Star Wars #44, where we had the first appearance of Boba Fett, that was another book that actually, kind of had a huge correction after its initial hype for that show. And I really think that, Star Wars #1 is really the only book that's going to have that staying power because of the fact that, outside of all the spec, it just feels like the most satisfying one to collect, satisfying one to own. And I know that there's a lot of other, second prints and things like that people like to have as well. So that's going to be a book that always holds that value. And then some of these other books, in the Star Wars market, it really does feel like there's just a little bit of hype there, but just not enough. I mean, I'm always surprised from week to week that we're not really seeing any books showing up on the hot list, even though we have Obi-Wan Kenobi, which apparently is the highest watched Disney Plus show. Anyways, that's all for this video. That was me just kind of taking a look at the market, taking a look at some of the books. What do you guys think about this? What do you guys think of the show so far? Have you been enjoying it? Drop me a like, comment, subscribe if you're enjoying the content, and I'll see you in the next video.